Netanyahu is in a very strange situation in which, on Friday, the 26th of September, he was thundering at the UN that there will never be a Palestinian state, that this war is far from over, that Israel still has to get the job done. And just under 3 days later, on Monday, the 29th of September, he was standing next to Donald Trump, perhaps a bit meekly at the White House, saying, "I accept your parameters for the end of the war."
It is time for us to head over to the Middle East. Thousands of Palestinians are returning home to Gaza as a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas began on Friday morning. Here with the latest developments is Noga Tarnopolsky, Israeli-Palestinian journalist based in Jerusalem. Noga, welcome back to the show. Good to speak to you.
And you?
Noga, what's the atmosphere like at the moment in Israel?
Quite tense, hopeful, but trepidatious. It's a complicated moment. There is more than a spark of hope right now. There's really a sense of momentum and the real feeling that this deal will move ahead. But there's still fears that anything could, torpedo it, scuttle it, that until almost everyone I've spoken to, I'll put it this way, in the last few days has said to me, whatever they want to say, and then say, I'll believe it when I see the hostages. There's a lot of fear.
What are people primarily worried about? What is the thing they're mostly worried about going wrong?
Well, I think they're worried about the three obvious things. They're worried that their own government will find a way to torpedo this deal, as it has abandoned similar deals in the past. That's one real fear. Another fear is that Hamas will somehow back out or will not fulfill its part. And the third fear is that of a mistake. For example, all of these residents of North Gaza or of Gaza City who we see streaming back, they're doing so against the orders of the IDF, while the Israel Defense Forces continue to say that up there is a dangerous war zone. In part, that's because of the belief that many of the still living hostages are in that area. And, an errant bullet could hit one of them. I mean, there are any number of things that could go wrong in such a difficult armed situation.
What do the next 48, 72 hours look like, Noga? We know that Donald Trump is going to be making his way to the Middle East. Are there any signposts of when we might see that release of the remaining hostages?
Look, I'll tell you, I've spent the last 2 hours trying to find out because I have to make my own plans to cover the event. I don't think anybody knows. The families of the hostages certainly don't know. No official notification has come through. We know that per the parameters of the Trump plan, the living Israeli hostages should all be out by Monday at noon local time, so 10 a.m. UK time. But we've had no indications. It could be in 2 hours. It could be a bit after the deadline. There's another possible stumbling block already visible because the original Trump plan had it that all the hostages, living and dead, would be released by that deadline. Hamas doesn't knowledge about where all of the bodies are buried. So an international task force is going to come into Gaza to help the Israelis try and locate these bodies using intelligence. And if they're not all found, if we have some 30 Israeli families still waiting to bury their dead, that could be another stumbling block, or it could even be used as a pretext for the Israeli government to renege on its parts of the deal.
What do we know about the situation in Gaza, Noga? We know that the ceasefire is in effect. What do we know about aid getting into the places that need it?
To my knowledge, first of all, in recent weeks, there has been somewhat of a surge in aid. There's a reason that you're hearing a lot less talk of starvation or a famine in Gaza than we were all hearing, a month and a half ago. So there has been some kind of stabilization. But of course, as this deal gets underway, Gaza should be seeing a huge surge in aid, and the UN has already said it is ready and prepared to bring in massive amounts of aid, not only food, but principally food, medication, shelter for people ahead of the incoming cold weather and so forth. But that has not yet gotten underway. I don't think it's going to start before this initial kind of test phase of the release of the living Israeli hostages, who number we expect around 20, and then the release of about 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees.
Now, it might seem a bit crass to talk about politics in Israel at the moment, but you and I have been talking about this very issue now for quite some time. So let's look at the Israeli government right now. What situation does Benjamin Netanyahu find himself in right now? Some people have said, well, this deal, if it's been successful, will certainly lead to new elections in Israel, and that's going to be a problem for Netanyahu. What's top of his agenda right now?
Here also, I have to say, we're talking about an unknown. Netanyahu is in a very strange situation in which, you know, on Friday, the 26th of September, he was thundering at the UN that there will never be a Palestinian state, that this war is far from over, that Israel still has to get the job done. And just under 3 days later, on Monday, the 29th of September, he was standing next to Donald Trump, perhaps a bit meekly at the White House, saying, I accept your parameters for the end of the war. So one big question mark hovers over all of us, which is what happened during that weekend. Netanyahu came back to Israel and has ever since then been marketing this deal to Israelis as his own success. He is known to be a political magician in Israel, and it is entirely possible that once again he will succeed and that Israelis will perceive this end of war and certainly, especially, the end of this simply open wound of the hostages being held by Hamas, that they'll perceive it as his victory. He is making every effort to transmit this narrative to the Israeli people, while I have to say the Israeli opposition still hasn't gotten in the saddle and is not really presenting yet the reality, which is we all know that Joe Biden had an almost identical deal on the table in March of 2024. And so there are real questions in Israel about all the many thousands of people who have died since then and how this could be justified. So Netanyahu is trying to stave off those questions by presenting this as his great victory that only could come about after tremendous military pressure from Israel and with Donald Trump as president. The big question is, will the Israeli people, or enough of the Israeli people, buy that? Or have the Israeli people been burnt too badly by Netanyahu, and are they moving on? We just don't know yet.
Noga, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.